He built an empire from poverty. He was about to sign the contract of his life, but his translator kept changing every word. They were robbing him right to his face. And who saved him wasn't his lawyer. It was someone no one even noticed. The pen touched the paper, and at that precise instant, a voice no one expected cut through the restaurant air like glass shattering in a silent church. "Mr. Tan, please don't sign." Everyone at the table froze. The American executive dropped his napkin. The lawyer, observing from a nearby table, stood up so fast he knocked over his drink. And the translator, the man who was supposed to be the bridge between two languages, lost all color from his face, as if his blood had been instantly drained. But the woman who had uttered those words wasn't an executive, wasn't a lawyer, wasn't anyone who had a place in that multi-million-dollar negotiation. She was the waitress, the same one who had spent the entire evening silently refilling wine glasses, the one no one had looked at twice, the one the world treated as if she were part of the decoration, and what she was about to say would shatter the entire evening, ruin careers, and save the life of a man who had no idea he was being betrayed with a smile. But to understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back. Because this story doesn't begin with contracts or luxury restaurants. It begins with mud, with hunger, and with a pair of bare feet that walked 3 kilometers daily to reach a school that didn't even have a complete roof. Mr. Tan Boon Huat was born in a kampung so small in Singapore that it didn't even appear on maps. The kind of kampung where the paths were dirt, where water was carried in buckets from the communal pump, and where children learned to work before they learned to read. His mother, Lima Moy, washed clothes for others before dawn. Her hands were cracked from soap and cold, but they were never empty of affection. His father had left when Boon Huat was 4 years old. He left no letter, no explanation, no farewell hug. He only left a debt with the village grocer and a silence that medium. Lim filled with work and dignity. Boon Huat grew up without knowing what a new toy was. His first pair of shoes arrived when he was 9, donated by a community teacher named Mr. Rajan, who saw something different in that thin boy with huge eyes, who always sat in the front row, even if he had no notebook to write in. Mr. Rajan taught him to read with a poetry book whose pages were yellowed with time, and Boon Huat read aloud every night by candlelight so his mother could listen while she finished ironing the next day's clothes. At 14, Boon Huat had to leave school. Not because he wanted to. His mother fell ill, and someone had to put food on the table. He started selling tissues at traffic lights in the nearest town. He slept in the back of a hawker stall in exchange for sweeping the floor every morning. He ate what was left over from the day before. Sometimes there was nothing left. But Boon Huat had something that neither hunger nor fatigue could take away, a mind that never rested. While others slept, he observed, watched how street businesses operated, what successful hawkers sold, how they spoke, how they looked into their customers' eyes. He memorized everything. Every conversation he overheard was a lesson. Every failure he saw in others, a lesson he stored away not to repeat it. At 18, with savings barely enough to buy a rusty metal pushcart, he set up a laksa stall on a street corner in the city center. He prepared them with the recipes his mother had taught him, with that flavor that doesn't come from any book, but from the hands of a woman who cooked her whole life with love, and with the little she had. The first day he sold 7 bowls of laksa, the second 15. Within a month, people were queuing up. Years passed. The pushcart became a permanent stall, with a canvas awning. The stall became a small shop with 4 tables. The shop became a restaurant with its own name, and that restaurant multiplied into Auntie Moy's Laksa, a chain that brought Singaporean heritage food to 6 states in the country. At 58, Mr. Tan Boon Huat was a respected man, with over 400 employees. Invitations to culinary festivals on 3 continents. Features in magazines. Journalists calling him the barefoot hawker tycoon because of the story of his first shoes, which had become a legend. But money never changed his heart. Every month, he sent money to his kampung school. He had built a community clinic so his mother wouldn't have to travel 8 hours by bus when she needed a doctor. And every December, without fail, he personally arrived in the kampung with boxes full of new shoes for the children. He always told them the same thing, kneeling to look them in the eyes. Feet that walk with dignity travel further than any express train in the world. The children laughed, but the parents, who knew his story, silently wiped away tears. Everything changed with a phone call. Mr. David Lee, his longtime lawyer, called him one Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Tan had known him for over 20 years. David had been the only lawyer who agreed to represent him when no one believed a hawker could register a brand. Boon Huat, sit down. David said, and his voice trembled in a way Mr. Tan had never heard. An international company wants the distribution rights for Auntie Moy's laksa for all of North America. We're talking about something huge. They want to meet you in person. Mr. Tan was silent. He felt something warm rise in his chest. His whole life, he had dreamed of taking his mother's flavors beyond borders. Not for the money. He already had more than he ever imagined when he slept on the floor of that hawker stall. He dreamed of it because his mother always said, "The best way to honor your heritage is to show the world what it's truly made of." "Who is it?" Mr. Tan asked, his voice tight. "It's Global Food Horizons Incorporated. It's run by a man named Mr. William Sterling, a magnate in the U.S. food industry. Restaurants, distribution chains, supermarkets, and apparently he tasted your laksa at a fair in Los Angeles and was so impressed he wants to deal directly with you. No intermediaries." Mr. Tan closed his eyes. His laksa, MDM. Lim's recipe, the same one he prepared in that rusty pushcart, the one his mother dictated to him on a rainy night while coughing, wrapped in an old blanket, telling him, "Learn it well, my son, because the day I leave, this recipe will continue to embrace people for me." "There's a problem," David added cautiously. "Sterling, and you don't speak English. We need a translator, someone absolutely trustworthy. Boon Huat, because what is said at that table will define the future of everything you've built." It was David who found him, or at least, that's what he thought. Kenji Tan appeared as a perfect answer to a desperate prayer. He arrived at Mr. Tan's office with a resume that seemed tailor-made to impress. Studies at the National University of Singapore, a master's in translation and interpretation, years of experience with international companies, references from embassies and prestigious law firms. Everything impeccable, polished, almost too convenient. He was 35 years old, a smile that inspired instant trust and that uncommon ability to make anyone drop their guard within the first 5 minutes. He spoke Malay with elegance and switched to English with a fluidity that seemed born, not learned. "Mr. Tan, it's an honor to meet you," he said, shaking his hand with measured firmness. "Neither too much nor too little. Your story is an inspiration. You can rest assured with me. Every word of yours will be accurately conveyed." Mr. Tan looked at him intently. There was something behind that smile that caused him subtle unease, like smelling distant smoke but not seeing the fire. A premonition pricked him somewhere he couldn't name, but he attributed it to nerves, the insomnia of recent weeks, the enormity of what was about to happen. "I only ask one thing of you, Kenji," Mr. Tan said, looking him directly in the eyes. "Translate my words exactly as I say them, with the same feeling. Because when I talk about my company, I'm talking about my entire life, my mother, everything." Kenji didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. "Every word, Mr. Tan, I promise you, every word will be precise." And Mr. Tan believed him because that's how he had been raised. Because in his kampung, when a man shook your hand and looked you in the eyes, that carried more weight than any signed document. Because Lim always said, to distrust people without reason is to dirty your own soul. What Mr. Tan didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that Kenji Tan had been preparing for this moment for months, that his references had been surgically fabricated, and that before stepping into that office, he had already signed an agreement with someone who promised him a 6-figure sum in exchange for one thing, ensuring Mr. Tan signed that contract without understanding what it truly said. The Orchid Conservatory was the kind of restaurant where the air itself smelled of money. Marble floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, waiters moved like elegant shadows. Live piano music floated softly between the tables. The kind of place where a single dish cost what an average family spent on food for a week. Mr. Tan arrived half an hour early. He always arrived early. It was a habit ingrained in his bones from the days when being 5 minutes late to the traffic lights meant losing the best corner to sell tissues. He wore his navy blue suit, the one MDM. Lim had helped him choose before her illness confined her to bed. In his inner pocket, he carried a photograph of his mother. He always took it to important moments. He touched it with his fingers before sitting down, like someone silently praying. Mr. William Sterling entered the restaurant as if he owned the entire building. Tall, with silver hair combed back, gray eyes that seemed to appraise the price of every person and object with a single glance. His gray suit was cut with a precision that spoke of European tailors, and his watch gleamed under the candlelight with the silent weight of inherited and multiplied fortune. He was accompanied by a young assistant carrying a black leather briefcase, as if it contained a bomb. Kenji sat between them. The bridge, the intermediary, the man who was supposedly going to connect two worlds. The dinner began with pleasantries. Sterling congratulated Mr. Tan on his company's growth. He spoke of the American market, the explosion of Asian cuisine, opportunities opening like palace doors. Kenji translated with impeccable fluidity. His eyes alternated between both men with the precision of a watchmaker. Mr. Tan responded with passion. He spoke of his mother, of the ancestral recipes, of how every dish from Auntie Moy's laksa was a piece of Singapore's heritage. As he spoke, his hands moved, his eyes moistened, his voice cracked at the edges. It was impossible not to feel the authenticity that flowed from every syllable. And then, when the waiter cleared the second course, the tone of the conversation changed. Sterling leaned forward, slightly loosened his tie knot, and began to speak of numbers, percentages, clauses, distribution rights. His voice became lower, sharper, like a scalpel preparing to cut. And that's where Kenji began to weave his trap. Mr. Sterling says he would like to start with distribution in 20 states with a percentage of 12% of the net profits for you. Kenji translated, without a single muscle in his face trembling. What Sterling had actually said was 25%. Mr. Tan frowned slightly. Something about that number bothered him like a pebble in his shoe. 12% seems low for the quality of our product. Tell him I'm thinking of 18 or 20%. Kenji nodded with a knowing gesture, turned to Sterling, and translated with the same naturalness with which a professional liar breathes. Mr. Tan accepts 12% and is also willing to cede quality control of the ingredients to your team. Sterling raised his eyebrows. A slow smile crossed his face. He looked at Mr. Tan and nodded with genuine admiration. Excellent. That makes things immensely easier. Tell him I'm very impressed with his generosity. He says he's delighted with your proposal, Mr. Tan, Kenji translated. Mr. Tan smiled proudly. He believed he was winning. He believed his product spoke for itself. And so, word by word, the betrayal was woven like an invisible cobweb between the porcelain plates and crystal glasses. Then something happened that almost ruined everything for Kenji. Sterling's assistant, a young, fair-haired man with glasses who had remained silent all evening, jotted a note on his tablet and murmured quietly, 25% is generous from our side already. Kenji felt his stomach freeze. He glanced at Mr. Tan, but the entrepreneur was focused on his dish, cutting a piece of meat with the clumsy elegance of a man who learned table manners as an adult. He hadn't heard anything. Kenji cleared his throat and approached the assistant with a casual smile. He said something in English in a very low voice, pointing to the document. The young man nodded and returned to his tablet. Crisis averted, but a bead of sweat rolled down Kenji's temple, and he discreetly wiped it with his napkin, like someone swatting an imaginary mosquito. No one noticed, except one person. Priya Sharma was 26 years old and had been working at the Orchid Conservatory for 3 years. She was born in Singapore, the daughter of a secondary school teacher and a nurse. With a full scholarship, she studied international relations and learned English, French, and Portuguese, convinced that languages were bridges that could take you anywhere in the world. And she was right. Only life decided to exact its toll at the worst possible moment, when her father, Mr. Suresh Sharma, was diagnosed with an expensive illness requiring costly treatment. Priya had to leave her job at a consultancy to cover medical expenses. She took the waitressing job as temporary, a stopgap, a for now that had already lasted 3 years, 6 months, and 14 days. But every night, after the restaurant closed, she studied, she read, she prepared, because Priya Sharma refused to believe that serving tables was the end of her story. That night, she was assigned to table 7, Mr. Tan's table, and from the first moment she served appetizers and heard Kenji translate, something inside her lit up like an emergency siren. At first, she told herself she had misheard. The murmur of the restaurant, the piano music, the clinking of glasses, all created a curtain of sound that could confuse even the most trained ear. But as she approached to serve the red wine, with the bottle tilted beside the table, and Kenji's words reached her ears clearly, Priya felt the ground open beneath her feet. Kenji wasn't translating. He was fabricating a complete lie with the tranquility of someone reciting a prayer before sleep. The bottle trembled in her hands. A drop of wine fell on the white tablecloth like a dark, unsettling stain. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, wiping it with a napkin, lowering her head so no one would see the expression of horror distorting her face. She returned to the kitchen with trembling legs, leaned against the stainless steel wall, and closed her eyes. Her colleague, another waitress, asked if she was okay. "Yes, I just need a moment," she replied. But she wasn't okay. She had just discovered that a man was being robbed in plain sight, without a gun, without violence, without shouts, only with poisoned words and a perfect smile. She looked out into the dining room through the kitchen window. She saw Mr. Tan talking with his hands, his eyes bright, with that unmistakable passion of someone who loves what he has built. And she saw Kenji nodding, smiling, and continuing to destroy it with every false translation. Priya had two options: stay silent, finish her shift, collect her tips, and go home as if nothing had happened, or do something that would probably cost her job, her only income, the money that paid for her father's treatment. She thought of her father, of what he had always taught her in his ethics classes. "Daughter, the day you see an injustice and look the other way, that day you stop being who you are." And Priya Sharma was not willing to stop being who she was. Back at the table, Sterling signaled his assistant. The young man opened the black leather briefcase and took out a thick document bound with a dark blue cover bearing the golden logo of Global Food Horizons Incorporated. He placed it on the table with the solemnity of someone presenting a verdict. Kenji took the document and began to explain the clauses to Mr. Tan. According to his translation, the contract guaranteed total protection of the original recipes, a majority share in profits, and a special fund for the heritage communities of Singapore that produced the ingredients. Every word was a lie. The reality was brutal. That contract permanently and irreversibly transferred the rights to all Auntie Moy's laksa recipes to Global Food Horizons Incorporated. Mr. Tan would be unknowingly signing the death warrant for his own company, MDM. Lim's legacy, packaged and sold as merchandise. Mr. Tan took a pen from his inner jacket pocket. Not just any pen, it was the same one he had bought the day he opened his first restaurant. Black, with a gold stripe, with the name Auntie Moy's Laksa engraved in small letters. He twirled it between his fingers with reverence, as if holding a fragment of his own history. "Tell Mr. Sterling," Mr. Tan said, his voice trembling at the edges, "that for me, signing this contract is like handing someone a piece of my heart. That my mother always said food is the way those who are no longer here continue to embrace you, and that I hope he will care for these flavors as I have cared for them all my life." A couple at the next table, who had overheard fragments of the conversation in Malay, discreetly turned to look at the man in the blue suit who spoke with moist eyes about his mother. Kenji translated something completely different, something cold, corporate, empty, something that had not a drop of the soul Mr. Tan had poured into every word. Sterling listened to the translation, nodded with a satisfied expression, and pointed to the dotted line at the end of the document. The pen lowered toward the paper. From the other end of the dining room, Priya watched as the metal tip touched the first curve of the letter A. Arturo, the name of a man about to sign his own destruction. Priya's heart pounded so hard she felt the beats in her temples. She looked around. The restaurant manager was at the entrance talking to some clients. Her colleagues were attending to other tables. No one was looking at her. No one was going to stop her, but no one was going to back her up either. She breathed. She dropped the silver tray onto the nearest table with a metallic clang that made two diners look up. She walked one step, 2, 5, 10, each one heavier than the last, as if the floor were turning into wet sand. She felt her apron tight against her chest. She felt fear like a living animal climbing up her throat. She stopped next to table 7, looked directly at Mr. Tan, and with a firm voice that contrasted with the earthquake shaking her hands, uttered the words no waitress in the history of that restaurant had ever uttered. "Mr. Tan, please don't sign that document." Silence fell over the table like a slab of concrete. The pianist continued to play, but for the 5 human beings gathered around that white tablecloth, the entire world had stopped. Kenji paled, his right hand clenched into a fist under the table. Sterling frowned, not understanding the words but feeling the weight of the tension, like a pressure change before a storm. His assistant stopped typing on his tablet. David Lee, who had been observing from a nearby table, stood up so quickly that his chair screeched against the marble and several heads turned. Mr. Tan looked up. The pen hovered millimeters from the paper, and he saw the young woman's eyes. Dark, bright eyes, full of a mixture of absolute fear and unbreakable determination that hit his chest like a decades-old memory. That same gaze, exactly that, was what his mother wore when debt collectors came to their door in MDM. Lim stood before them, small but invincible, and told them with a voice of stone, "They won't take anything from here." "Who are you?" Mr. Tan asked in a whisper. It doesn't matter who I am, sir, Priya replied. What matters is what I've heard all night. Kenji reacted. Mr. Tan, this woman has nothing to do with our meeting. She's just a waitress who is surely confused. Priya didn't let him finish. She turned to him, looked at him with a chilling calm, and said, in perfect English, addressing Sterling, Mr. Sterling, I need you to know that your translator has been lying to both of you all night long. Every single number he gave Mr. Tan was wrong. And that contract does not say what he told this man, it says. Sterling's face transformed. His negotiator's smile froze. His gaze traveled from Priya to Kenji, and what he saw on the translator's face was the loudest confirmation silence can give. Because Kenji Tan, the man with the easy smile and precise words, had become completely mute, his lips parted, with the eyes of a trapped animal that knows the cage has just closed. Priya turned back to Mr. Tan. Her voice trembled, but her words fell on that table with the weight of a truth that could no longer be contained. Sir, your translator has been lying to you all night. Every figure he told you is false. Every clause he explained is invented, and that contract you are about to sign does not protect your company. Mr. Tan, it takes it away. It takes it away forever. Mr. Tan lowered the pen, placing it on the table with the gentleness of someone who has just released a grenade before it explodes. And in his eyes, where moments before the emotion of a dream fulfilled shone, now something completely different burned. The silence at that table lasted exactly 4 seconds, but they were the longest 4 seconds in the lives of everyone present, because in that silence fit an entire life of sacrifice about to be destroyed, a calculated betrayal to the millimeter, and the impossible bravery of a woman who risked everything for a stranger. And what came after those 4 seconds changed the lives of everyone sitting at that table forever. 4 seconds. That's how long the silence lasted. But in those 4 seconds, each person at that table lived an entire lifetime. Mr. Tan gazed at Priya without blinking. His hand still rested on the pen, but he no longer held it. He had released it as one releases something that suddenly burns. He felt his chest tight, his jaw tense, and a dull hum in his ears, as if someone had struck a bell inside his skull. Kenji was the first to break the silence. He stood up with a forced laugh that sounded hollow like a fake coin falling on marble. This is ridiculous, Mr. Tan. This young lady doesn't know what she's talking about. She's a waitress. With all due respect, since when does a person who serves plates understand international contracts? The words came out of his mouth in a tone meant to be derogatory, but his voice trembled on the last syllable, and that tremor betrayed him more than any confession. Priya didn't retreat an inch. She looked directly at him and replied with a calm that seemed carved in stone. You're right, Mr. Tan. I am a waitress. I serve plates, I fill glasses, but I also speak 3 languages, and I've heard every word you've said tonight, every lie, every number you changed, every clause you invented. She turned to Sterling and continued in English with a pronunciation that made the American executive's eyes widen, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Mr. Sterling, you offered 25%. He told Mr. Tan, you said 12%. Mr. Tan asked for 18%. He told you Mr. Tan accepted 12% and was willing to give up quality control. Nothing this man translated tonight was real. Nothing. Sterling remained motionless. His gaze pierced Kenji like a burning nail. He didn't need anyone to confirm anything. The translator's disfigured face was the most eloquent proof there was. David Lee arrived at the table with a flushed face. He had heard enough from his position. He took the contract with both hands, brought it close to the chandelier light, and began to read the clauses in English with the slowness of someone disarming a bomb, wire by wire. As he read, his expression transformed. First it was confusion, then disbelief, and finally a silent rage that reddened his neck and tensed every muscle in his jaw. "Bun what?" David said, without looking up from the document, his voice barely controlled. "This contract transfers total ownership of all your recipes, all of them. Your mother's laksa, your char kway teow, your Hainanese chicken rice. Everything becomes the property of Global Food Horizons Incorporated, permanently, with no right to retrieve them ever." Mr. Tan felt the air escape his body, as if a hole had been opened in his chest. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and touched his mother's photograph. He squeezed it with his fingers, as if he could feel her hand holding him. "My mother's recipes," he whispered, his voice broken. "They were going to take my mother's recipes." He didn't shout, didn't bang the table, didn't insult anyone. He simply repeated those words in a whisper that hurt more than any scream. Because there was something in the way he said "my mother" that made even the pianist across the room stop playing. as if the man's sadness had traveled through the air and touched his hands. Sterling rose from his chair. His face had completely changed. He was no longer the calculating negotiator who had entered the restaurant an hour earlier. Now he was a man who had just discovered that someone had used his name to commit something he would never have allowed. He looked at Kenji and spoke to him in slow, heavy English, laden with a controlled fury that was far more terrifying than any shout. I came here to make a fair deal with a man I admire. I came here because his food moved me, and you used my name, my company, to try to steal everything from him. You are done. Kenji took a step back, opened his mouth to defend himself, but no sound came out. He looked around for an escape, an ally, someone to back him up. He found no one. Only faces that looked at him with the disdain reserved for those who betray the trust of the vulnerable. Who hired you? David asked, stepping towards him. Because you didn't set this up alone. Someone put you there. Someone fabricated that resume. Who was it? Kenji did not respond. He took his jacket from the back of the chair and walked toward the exit with quick, clumsy steps, his head down and shoulders hunched, like someone trying to make themselves small so the world wouldn't see them. But before he reached the door, Mr. Tan spoke, and what he said stopped Kenji dead in his tracks, as if the words were a concrete wall. Kenji. The translator stopped, but did not turn around. My mother washed clothes for others to feed me, Mr. Tan said, his voice trembling but firm. She never stole anything from anyone, not a cent, not a garment. And today you tried to steal the only thing I have left of her. Her recipes, her memory, her embrace, made into food. He paused, breathed, and added something no one present would ever forget. I wish you no ill, but I hope that one day you understand that what you tried to steal tonight is priceless. Because things cooked with love cannot be bought or sold, they can only be inherited. Kenji left the restaurant without a word. The glass door closed behind him with a soft sound that, in the midst of that silence, seemed like thunder. Mr. Tan remained standing by the table. He trembled, not from rage, but from something deeper, from that mixture of relief and pain, known only to someone who was a second away from losing what they loved most in the world. He looked up and searched for Priya. He found her standing 3 steps from the table, hands clasped, eyes full of tears she refused to shed, her apron crumpled in her fists. What's your name? Mr. Tan asked. Priya, sir. Priya Sharma. Mr. Tan walked towards her, and, in front of William Sterling, in front of David, in front of the entire restaurant, which had already stopped pretending not to look, he did something no one expected. He took her hands, the same hands that served plates and carried trays. He held them in his own, those hands hardened by 40 years of work, and said to her, his voice broken, Priya, tonight you gave me back everything I almost lost. I don't know how to repay something like this. Priya shook her head and a tear finally escaped. You owe me nothing, Mr. Tan. My father always told me that truth isn't charged for, it's given freely. And at that moment, from the next table, someone started to applaud, then another, and another, until the entire restaurant, without knowing exactly everything that had happened, but feeling the weight of what they had just witnessed, filled with applause that made the crystal glasses vibrate on the tables. But the night wasn't over, because as Kenji Tan disappeared into the darkness of the street, his phone rang, and the person on the other end of the line was not someone who accepted failure, and what was to come would be much worse than a false translation. Kenji Tan's phone vibrated 3 times before he dared to answer. He stood on the pavement in front of the Orchid Conservatory, his jacket crumpled under his arm, his tie knot undone, and cold sweat sticking his shirt to his back. The screen glowed in the darkness, with a name that wasn't a name, just a letter. G. Kenji closed his eyes, swallowed hard, and answered. It didn't work, he said before the other person could speak. His voice came out broken, like a child who knows they are about to be punished. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a silence that lasted barely 3 seconds, but which felt like an eternity to Kenji. And then, a deep, slow voice, without any visible emotion, replied, I know. They just called me from the restaurant. Do you know what you just did, Kenji? You didn't just lose the contract. You just shone a light on something that needed to stay in the dark. Kenji felt his legs give way. He leaned against a lamppost and looked up at the sky as if searching for oxygen. It was a waitress, he murmured. A waitress who speaks English. Who could have foreseen something like that? You were supposed to foresee everything. That's what I paid you for. That's what I fabricated your resume, your references, your entire history for. And you come to tell me that a woman in an apron disarmed you in 30 seconds. The line went dead without a goodbye, without an explicit threat. Just the emptiness of a terminated call, which in that context sounded more dangerous than any words. Kenji remained motionless on the pavement for several minutes. A taxi passed him and offered service. He didn't respond. A street vendor offered him cigarettes. He didn't respond either. He was paralyzed by something beyond fear. The absolute certainty that he had gotten into something he could no longer get out of. Inside the restaurant, as the applause faded and diners slowly returned to their conversations, a silent storm was brewing. The manager of the Orchid Conservatory, a slender man in a black suit and silver tie named Mr. Stephen Lim, crossed the dining room with quick, precise steps. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes fixed on a single target. Priya Sharma, he said her name as if it were a sentence. My office, now. Priya nodded, without saying anything. She knew what was coming. She had known it from the moment she dropped the tray and walked towards that table. In the Orchid Conservatory, a waiter did not interrupt a client. Never, much less a business table with foreigners. It was rule number 1, the one instilled in every employee's mind from day one. But before Priya took a single step, Mr. Tan intervened. Not aggressively, not with authority, but with the calm of a man who has faced far worse things than a restaurant manager. Excuse me, sir, Mr. Tan said, looking directly into Stephen's eyes. May I know what is going to happen to this young woman? With all due respect, Mr. Tan, it's an internal matter of the restaurant. Miss Sharma violated service protocol, and Miss Sharma, Mr. Tan interrupted him with a voice that brooked no argument. She just saved me from signing a contract that would have taken everything I have. Everything, my company, my recipes, my legacy. If you punish her for telling the truth, then this restaurant and I have a problem. Mr. William Sterling, who was still standing by the table, intervened in English. David translated instantly. Tell the manager that if he fires this woman, I will personally ensure that every important client I know hears that honesty is punished in this restaurant, and I know many. Stephen Lim looked at Sterling, looked at Mr. Tan, looked at David, and finally looked at Priya, who remained silent with her head held high and her hands still at her sides. The manager took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and said with a forced smile, it was a misunderstanding. Priya, return to your service. Nothing has happened. But Mr. Tan wasn't finished. He approached Priya and said in a low voice, only for her to hear, you don't belong here, Priya. And I don't say that as an insult. I say it because I know people who are in the wrong place. I was one of them for a long time. Tomorrow, I want you to come find me. We need to talk. Priya didn't respond with words. She just nodded. But in her eyes appeared something that hadn't been there in a long time. Hope. An hour later, the restaurant had closed to the public, but table 7 remained occupied. Mr. Tan, David, and Mr. William Sterling remained seated under the dim light of a chandelier that was slowly burning out. On the table, the fake contract lay open like an exposed wound. Sterling spoke first. David translated every word with precision, aware that now more than ever, the truth could not afford a single crack. Mr. Tan, I need you to understand something, Sterling began. His tone was no longer that of the cold negotiator who had arrived hours earlier. It was that of an uncomfortable, embarrassed man trying to reconstruct something that had broken. This contract you have on the table is not the document my legal team prepared. It is not, Mr. Tan frowned. What do you mean? Sterling pulled out his phone, found a file, and showed it to David. It was a digital document with the Global Food Horizons Incorporated letterhead, but with completely different clauses. David read it in silence, comparing paragraph by paragraph with the printed contract on the table. Boon Huat, David said, looking up with wide eyes. Sterling's original contract is fair. 25% profit. Full protection of recipes, a favorable termination clause for you. A community fund for Singapore's heritage communities. Everything Kenji told you it said is what the original document actually says. Someone changed the printed contract. Someone replaced the real document with this fake one before dinner. The air at the table became dense. Mr. Tan processed the information slowly, like someone assembling a puzzle with pieces he didn't want to touch. So Sterling didn't know, he murmured. He didn't, David confirmed. Sterling brought a clean deal. Someone within the chain, someone with access to the briefcase, switched the papers, and Kenji was there to ensure you signed the fake version without suspecting anything. Sterling, through David, added, my assistant prepared the documents and put them in the briefcase before leaving the hotel. Between that moment and dinner, someone had access, and I assure you, Mr. Tan, I will find that person, because they used my name and my company to try to destroy yours, and I will not tolerate that. Mr. Tan looked at him intently for several seconds. He was looking in that man's eyes for the same thing he looked for in everyone: truth. And what he found was enough. "I believe you," Mr. Tan said, "because my mother taught me to distinguish between a man who lies with his mouth and a man who tells the truth with his eyes. And you are telling me the truth, Mr. Sterling." Sterling extended his hand across the table. Mr. Tan took it, and that handshake, without a translator, without intermediaries, without words, said more than any contract in the world. David Lee didn't sleep that night. He went to his office directly from the restaurant. He loosened his tie, turned on his desk lamp, and began making calls, one after another, with the fierce patience of a man who knows every minute counts. He checked Kenji Tan's references one by one. He called the National University of Singapore. No one with that name appeared in the translation and interpretation program, neither as a graduate, nor as an active student, nor even as a rejected applicant. He called the embassy that had supposedly employed him for 2 years. The human resources director assured him they had never had an employee named Kenji Tan. The law firms listed as references on his resume said exactly the same thing. They had never hired, consulted, or even interviewed anyone by that name. Everything was false. Every line, every reference, every certificate. A professional identity fabricated with the precision of someone who knew exactly how to deceive an experienced lawyer. And that was what hurt David the most, because he had been deceived. He had brought Kenji in. He had put the wolf at the stable door. He poured himself a coffee that was already cold and continued searching. He reviewed public records, professional databases, social media, and then he found something that changed the direction of everything. Upon reviewing the records of the courier company that had delivered the contract documents to Sterling's hotel, he discovered that the original package had been received by Sterling's assistant at 2 p.m., but there was a second reception signature in the same record, an hour later, authorized with a different name, Desmond Coe. David felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that name, knew it very well. Desmond Coe had been Mr. Tan's partner years ago, in the early days of Auntie Moy's Laksa, when the company was just a restaurant and a dream. Coe had put in some money, and Mr. Tan had put in everything else. The work, the recipes, the sleepless nights, the soul. When the business began to grow, Coe wanted to change the recipes to cut costs, replace original ingredients with industrial versions, turn MDM, Lim's food into a factory product. Mr. Tan refused, and that refusal led to a separation that, though legal and clean, left in Desmond Coe a resentment that fermented for years like a silent poison. Coe received his fair share of the money, but what he really wanted could not be bought. The recipes, the secret, the soul of Auntie Moy's Laksa. And now David had his name in a courier record, at the same hotel, on the same day, next to the briefcase that contained a contract someone had changed. David picked up the phone and called Mr. Tan. It was 4 a.m. Mr. Tan answered on the first ring. He hadn't slept either. "Boon Huat, I know who's behind all this. Tell me." "Desmond Coe." The silence that followed was different from all the other silences that night. It wasn't a silence of surprise. It was a silence of pain. The kind of pain you feel when you discover that someone you trusted, someone with whom you shared bread and dreams, has been planning to destroy you behind your back. "Desmond," Mr. Tan repeated softly. And in that single word lay an entire history of broken friendship, of clasped hands that now stabbed, of shared meals that now tasted of betrayal. Mr. Tan remembered the last time he had seen Desmond. It was the day they signed the separation of their partnership. Desmond had shaken his hand, wished him luck, and told him with a smile that Mr. Tan mistook for maturity, no hard feelings, Boon Huat, business is business, and Mr. Tan, naive as ever, had believed him because he wanted to believe him, because it was easier to believe that a friendship could end cleanly than to accept that some wounds fester in silence until they become something unrecognizable. "What do we do?" Mr. Tan asked after a long silence. "First thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to present everything to the authorities," David replied. "But I need you to be prepared, Boon Huat, because if Desmond was capable of setting all this up, he won't sit still when he knows we've discovered him. This is just beginning." Mr. Tan hung up the phone, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at his mother's photograph that he had left on the bedside table. MDM. Lim's face looked back at him with that expression he knew by heart, half tenderness, half fierce determination. "Oh, Mother," he whispered, "you always told me to be careful of those who smile too much. I should have listened to you." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a small third-floor apartment in a building without an elevator, Priya Sharma arrived home with trembling legs and a still-racing heart. Her father, Mr. Suresh Sharma, was awake. He always waited for her, even though she asked him not to. He was sitting in his usual armchair with a blanket over his legs and an open book he was no longer reading. "How was it, my daughter?" he asked, with that soft voice that the treatment had thinned but had not stripped of its tenderness. Priya sat beside him, looked at him, saw the deep, dark circles, the skin paler than the week before, the thin hands that were once strong and now held a book with the fragility of someone holding a memory. And for the first time in a long time, she couldn't hold back what was inside her. She told him everything: the dinner, the translator, the lies, the decision she made in the middle of the dining room while feeling her heart was about to explode, the fear, the voice that came out firm when she was trembling inside. Mr. Tan's words, the silence, and the applause that filled the restaurant as if the world, for an instant, had recognized that truth still had value. Mr. Suresh listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took off his glasses, cleaned them with the corner of his blanket, and told her something Priya would keep forever. "Do you know what the hardest thing in the world is, daughter? It's not telling the truth. The hardest thing is deciding to tell it when you know it will cost you something. You did the hardest thing tonight, and I am prouder of you now than when you received your scholarship, because titles speak of what you know, but what you did today speaks of who you are." Priya rested her head on her father's shoulder and cried, not from sadness, but from relief, from exhaustion, from that strange emotion that appears when you do something that terrifies you and discover you survived, that it was worth it, that your hands tremble, but your soul feels lighter. "Mr." Suresh stroked her hair as he did when she was a child, and came home crying from school because some classmate had mocked her patched backpack. He always told her the same thing: "Mended things are the strongest, my daughter, because they know what it is to be broken." "Papa, Mr. Tan told me to look for him tomorrow, that he wants to talk to me." Mr. Suresh smiled. "Then go, because the doors opened by truth are the only ones that never close." At 6 a.m., when the sun was just beginning to color the Singapore sky with orange and pink hues, three things were happening simultaneously in different parts of the city. In his office, David Lee finished assembling a dossier with every piece of evidence he had found overnight. He had Desmond Coe's name, the signature in the hotel register, Kenji's false references, and a line of investigation pointing to something much larger than anyone had imagined. Because Coe was not acting alone. He had connections, resources, and a plan no one saw coming. In a downtown hotel, Mr. William Sterling spoke via video conference with his legal team in New York. He had ordered a complete audit of all documents related to the anti-Moise Laksa negotiation, and what they were finding disturbed him more and more. The fake contract was not an improvised job. It was a legal masterpiece designed by someone who understood Singaporean and international laws with alarming depth. And in an apartment without an elevator, Priya Sharma woke up early, dressed in the best clothes she had, kissed her father on the forehead, and left for the address Mr. Tan had given her the night before. She didn't know what awaited her. She didn't know if that invitation was just a thank you or something more, but she felt something in her chest that she hadn't felt in 3 years. The feeling that she was walking towards where she was meant to be. What none of them knew, what no one could foresee, was that Desmond Coe was already moving his pieces, that the dinner's failure had not stopped him. It had enraged him, and what he was planning to do next was not only against Mr. Tan, but also against Priya, because for Desmond Coe that waitress was not a hero. She was an obstacle that had ruined months of preparation, an obstacle that had exposed his name, an obstacle that had to disappear from the story. And Desmond Coe was the kind of man who made obstacles disappear, not with violence, not with direct threats, but with something far more subtle and devastating, destroying someone's reputation until the whole world turned its back on them. Priya arrived at the anti-Moise Laksa offices at 9 a.m., her heart pounding in her throat. The building was not what she expected. It wasn't a glass tower or a cold corporate building with rehearsed smiles from receptionists. It was a well-preserved heritage shophouse in Tanjong Pagar and restored with respect, with volcanic stone walls, and an inner courtyard where an avocado tree, seemingly older than the building itself, grew. At the entrance, on a dark wooden frame, there was a black and white photograph of a woman in an apron standing next to a clay stove, with a smile that radiated a warmth that transcended the glass of the frame. Below, a brass plaque read, "Mediem, Lim A Moi," the heart of it all. Priya stopped in front of the photograph. She looked into those eyes that resembled Mr. Tan so much and understood, without anyone explaining it to her, that that woman was no longer in this world, that Nebiam. Lim had passed away some years ago when the illness Mr. Tan tried to fight with clinics, doctors and all his money finally proved stronger than any fortune. But her presence was still there, in every corner, in every dish, in every recipe that came out of the Auntie Moy's Laksa kitchens like a warm embrace for the world. She left 3 years before I could take her food across the border, a voice said behind Priya. She turned. Mr. Tan was standing in the hallway in a white shirt without a tie, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and eyes slightly red from lack of sleep, but refusing to complain. He held a cup of coffee in his hand, and an expression that mixed tiredness with something Priya didn't expect to find. Peace. Every time I'm about to achieve something important, I come and stand in front of this photo, Mr. Tan continued. And I say, Mother, almost there. I've been telling her that for years. She's probably tired of hearing it. He smiled. And in that smile, there was more sadness and more love than any words could contain. Thank you for coming, Priya. Come in. We have a lot to talk about. Mr. Tan's office was exactly like him. Simple on the outside, profound on the inside. A solid wooden desk, walls covered with photographs of his kampung, his employees, food festivals. In one corner, framed in a small, humble frame, was the first dollar he earned selling laksa. The coin was tarnished by time, but it shone under the light, as if it knew it was a treasure. Mr. Tan offered her a seat and went straight to the point. He was not a man for beating around the bush. Priya, last night you did something very few people in the world would have done. You took a risk. You put your job, your income, your family's stability at stake for a stranger. And I want you to know that that will not remain just an anecdote. I will not allow it. Priya opened her mouth to reply, but Mr. Tan gently raised his hand. Let me finish. David told me your story. I know you studied international relations. I know you speak 3 languages. I know you left your career to care for your father. And I know you've been serving tables for 3 years, waiting for an opportunity that hasn't come. He paused, took a sip of coffee, and looked at her with the same seriousness with which he looked at contracts that could change his company's destiny. I want to offer you a position at Auntie Moy's Laksa, not out of gratitude, not out of pity, but because what I saw in you last night is exactly what I need in my team. Someone who speaks languages, who understands business, who has courage, and above all, who cannot be bought. I want you to be my company's director of international relations. The air in the room stood still. Priya felt her knees trembling under the desk. Her mouth went dry. Her eyes welled up before she could stop them. Mr. Tan, I don't know what to say. Say yes or say no. But don't say you don't deserve it. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that opportunities don't always come when you look for them. Sometimes they come when you do the right thing without expecting anything in return. And that's exactly what you did last night, last time. Priya wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She thought of her father, of the night studying after closing the restaurant, of the 3 years carrying trays while feeling the world had forgotten her, of the times she looked in the service bathroom mirror and wondered if her life would ever be more than filling glasses and collecting tips. Yes, she said, her voice broken but firm. Yes, Mr. Tan, I accept. Mr. Tan nodded. There were no hugs, no celebration. Just a slow, deep nod, like 2 people understanding that what had just happened was bigger than an employment contract. It was a debt of the universe being settled in silence. You start next week, Mr. Tan said. But first, I need you to know something. What happened last night isn't over. It's just begun. And what's coming will be difficult. Very difficult. He told her everything David had discovered overnight. Desmond Coe's name, the signature at the hotel, the falsified contract, the web of lies that extended far beyond a simple bought translator. Priya listened to every word with wide eyes, and when Mr. Tan finished, she said something that left him speechless. Mr. Tan, if that man was capable of fabricating an entire resume and changing a contract in a supervised hotel, then he has people inside, people passing him information. And if he already knows the plan failed, the first thing he'll do is try to discredit everyone who discovered him, starting with the weakest link in the chain. And who is the weakest link? Mr. Tan asked, though he already sensed the answer. Priya pointed to herself with a sad smile. A waitress with no connections, no money, and no important surname. If he wants to destroy someone without anyone defending them, he'll start with me. And she was right. Because while Priya was sitting in Mr. Tan's office, accepting the opportunity of her life, Desmond Coe had already set his revenge in motion. Desmond Coe was 52 years old, with an angular face that was once attractive and was now hardened by resentment, and an office on the 30th floor of a building in Raffles Place, from where he could see the entire city as if it belonged to him. He had built his own food distribution business after separating from Mr. Tan, but it never achieved the success Auntie Moy's Laksa had, and that gnawed at him like a termite devouring a beam from within, invisible on the outside, devastating on the inside. For him, Madiem, Lim's recipes were the missing piece, the secret ingredient that would turn his company from just another one into a powerhouse. He didn't want to create something of his own. He wanted what Mr. Tan had. What Mr. Tan had inherited, what belonged to a woman who was no longer there to defend it. That morning, Desmond made 3 calls. The first was to a contact at a digital media outlet, a news portal for entertainment and scandals that fed on rumors like a vulture feeds on what others leave behind. He dictated a fabricated story, that a waitress from the Orchid Conservatory had interrupted a business dinner to extort an American executive, threatening to invent accusations if she wasn't paid a sum of money, that the waitress had a history of problematic behavior, that the restaurant was considering legal action, all false, every word. But in a world where headlines travel faster than truth, Desmond knew he didn't need the story to be true. He just needed it to be credible long enough to do damage. The second call was to the restaurant manager, Mr. Stephen Lim. Desmond knew him. They had met at gastronomic guild events. He suggested, with the poisonous delicacy of a snake that bites you while smiling, that perhaps the most prudent thing would be to fire Priya before the scandal splashed onto the restaurant. He reminded him that the Orchid Conservatory depended on its reputation and that having a problematic employee on the payroll could scare away important clients. The third call was to Kenji Tan, but this time Kenji didn't answer. His phone was off, and the apartment where he lived, as David would discover days later, was already empty. Kenji Tan had disappeared from Singapore like a ghost vanishing when daylight appears. The article appeared online that same afternoon. The headline was, "Poison, distilled in large letters. Waitress interrupts, $1 million dinner, attempts to extort foreign executive." It didn't mention Priya's name. It didn't need to. At the Orchid Conservatory, everyone knew who had interrupted the dinner at Table 7, and within hours, the rumor spread like wildfire through dry grass. Priya's colleagues began to look at her differently, some with curiosity, others with distrust, and a few, those who always seek a reason to feel superior, with barely concealed satisfaction. Priya found out about the news at noon, when her colleague from the restaurant sent her a screenshot with a message that said, "Did you see this? It's about you." She read the article 3 times, the first time with disbelief, the second with rage, the third with a knot in her stomach that made her feel as if the ground were opening beneath her feet for the second time in less than 24 hours. But this time it wasn't the floor of an elegant restaurant, it was the floor of her own life. She thought of her father. If Mr. Suresh saw that news, with his fragile health, the distress could cause him real harm. She thought of her neighbors, of the parents of the children she tutored in English on Saturday mornings to earn extra money. She thought of how a well-told lie could destroy in a day what a person took years to build. Her hands trembled when she called Mr. Tan. "I've seen it already," Mr. Tan replied, before she could explain anything. His voice sounded calm, but beneath that calm was a firmness Priya was beginning to recognize. The firmness of a man who had survived worse things than a defamatory article. "Priya, listen to me carefully. This is exactly what we expected, and it's exactly what we're going to use to unmask Desmond. They won't destroy you with lies, I promise you. Mr. Tan, my father, if he sees this, your father will not see that rubbish. David is already working with a media specialist lawyer. We're going to demand they remove the article, and we're going to respond with the truth. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Priya closed her eyes. She remembered MDM. Lim's photograph at the entrance of the offices. She remembered Mr. Tan's eyes when he spoke of his mother the night before, and she remembered what her own father had told her just a few hours ago. The doors opened by truth are the only ones that never close. I trust you, Mr. Tan. David Lee was no ordinary lawyer. He was a man who had learned law at university but had learned justice on the streets. He had defended hawkers against municipal abuses, small business owners against corporations that wanted to crush them, and entire families against unjust evictions. He knew how power worked, and he knew how to confront it. That afternoon, David gathered all the evidence in a dossier that weighed like a brick. Desmond Coe's signature in the hotel register, Kenji Tan's false references, The comparison between Sterling's original contract and the falsified version. Telephone records connecting Kenji to a number that, after an investigation, was registered to a shell company whose sole shareholder was Desmond Coe. But David did something more, something Desmond didn't expect. He called Mr. William Sterling and asked him for a favor. Sterling didn't hesitate for a second. He recorded a video statement from his hotel in English, looking directly at the camera, where he explained in detail what had really happened at the Orchid Conservatory. He confirmed that Kenji's translations were fraudulent, that the contract had been altered without his knowledge, and that Priya Sharma's intervention had been an act of honesty that saved both parties from a coordinated scam. He ended his statement with a phrase that would resonate far beyond that hotel room. That young woman extorted no one. That young woman was the only honest person at a table full of lies. And if the world has any sense, it should be thanking her instead of slandering her. David sent the video along with the entire dossier to 3 places simultaneously. To the competent authorities, to the news portal that had published the defamatory article, and to 5 investigative journalists who had been following corporate fraud cases in Singapore for years. At 7 p.m. that same day, Priya's phone rang. It was Mr. Stephen Lim, the manager of the Orchid Conservatory. "Priya," he said with a voice that sounded very different from the authoritarian man of the night before. Now, it was an uncomfortable, nervous voice, like someone who knows they are standing on the wrong side of history. "I need to talk to you. I made a mistake. Someone called me this morning and suggested I fire you, and I was about to do it, but then I saw Mr. Sterling's statement and understood what really happened. I owe you an apology." Priya listened in silence. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't shout at him. She didn't remind him that the previous night he had treated her as a problematic employee when she had just done the bravest thing in her life. She simply said, "Thank you for calling, Mr. Lim, but I won't need to return to the restaurant. I have a new path." There was a silence. And then Stephen asked, in a small voice, "Who called you to offer you something?" "No one called me, sir. I walked to where I was meant to be, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I've arrived." She hung up. She looked at the phone in her hands for a moment and smiled, not with the wide smile of someone celebrating a victory, but with the quiet smile of someone who knows one chapter has closed and another is beginning. That night, Mr. Tan did something he did every time life shook him hard. He drove for 40 minutes to a small columbarium on the outskirts of the city, where MDM Lim rested under a frangipani tree she herself had asked to be planted before she left. He knelt in front of the white marble plaque. He placed his hand on the cold stone, as if he could feel his mother's warmth through the earth, and spoke. He spoke as he did with her when he was a child, telling her his problems sitting on the kitchen floor while she ground spices. "Mother, they almost took them from me. They almost took your recipes. They almost took your laksa, your char kway teow, your Hainanese chicken rice, everything you taught me with those hands that never rested. A man I welcomed into my business was the one who planned everything. Desmond, Mother, do you remember him? You never liked him. You always told me that man had the eyes of someone who counts what belongs to others as if it were his own. You were right, as always." A gentle breeze rustled the frangipani branches. Some white flowers fell onto the plaque, as if the tree were responding. "But something good happened too, Mother. A young woman saved me. A waitress no one noticed. A woman like you, Mother. One of those the world ignores, but who holds everything together with their hands. Her name is Priya, and she has the same eyes as you when you stood up to the debt collectors. Those eyes that say, they won't take anything from here." Mr. Tan wiped his tears with his shirt sleeve. He wasn't ashamed to cry in front of his mother. He never had been. "I promised her I would protect her, Mother, just as you protected me. Because if you taught me anything, it's that when someone saves your life, you don't just say thank you and leave. You return the favor. You give them back what the world owes them, until you're even." He was silent for a moment. He listened to the crickets, the wind in the trees, the distant sound of the city that never sleeps, and he remembered something Mediem Lim used to tell him when he was a child and was afraid of the dark. "Darkness isn't bad, my son. It's just the world resting before trying again." That phrase had never made so much sense to him as in that moment. He stood up, dusted his knees, looked once more at the oval photograph embedded in the plaque, where Mediem Lim smiled with the same smile as in the photo at the Auntie Moy's Laksa office. "You rest, Mother. I'll handle it." The next day, 3 things happened that changed the course of history forever. At 9 a.m., the news portal that had published the defamatory article removed it without explanation. In its place appeared a brief note saying, For editorial reasons, this content has been removed, but the damage was already done. Thousands of people had read it, and on the internet, what is published never completely disappears. At 11 a.m., David Lee presented the complete dossier to the authorities. A prosecutor specializing in corporate crimes reviewed the evidence for 2 hours. When he finished, he looked up and said 4 words David had been waiting for all night. "This is very serious." And at 3 p.m., as Priya was sitting in her father's apartment reading him a book to distract him from the questions she knew he wanted to ask, someone knocked on the door. Priya opened it and froze. In front of her, with a bouquet of cheap flowers bought from the corner and eyes sunken from sleepless nights, stood Kenji Tan. He didn't have the perfect smile of the restaurant night. He didn't have the impeccable suit. He didn't have the upright posture of the man he had pretended to be. What he had was the haggard face of someone who has hit rock bottom and desperately needs to grab onto something before sinking completely. "Priya," he said, his voice broken. "I know I have no right to be here. I know you probably want to close the door in my face, but I need to talk to you because there are things Mr. Tan doesn't know. Things David didn't find in his records. Things that if I don't tell them now, will destroy more people than they already have." Priya looked at him intently. Every cell in her body screamed at her to close the door. Not to trust that man. To remember what he had done. What he had tried to steal. The lies he had translated with that mouth that now trembled. But she also remembered something her father once told her during one of his ethics classes, when a student asked him if liars deserve to be heard. "Truth doesn't choose who speaks it, my daughter. Sometimes it comes from the mouth of the one you least expect, and sometimes the person who has lied the most has the most truth to tell." Priya didn't close the door. She stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes," she said. And what Kenji Tan told her in those 5 minutes would change absolutely everything, because what lay behind Desmond Ko was not just a resentful ex-partner seeking revenge. It was something much bigger, much darker, and much more dangerous than any of them could imagine. Kenji Tan sat on the edge of an old chair in Priya's apartment. His hands were clasped, knuckles white with pressure, and his eyes fixed on the floor, as if he didn't dare to look directly at the woman whose life he had tried to destroy just 2 nights before. Priya stayed with her arms crossed and her back against the wall. She didn't offer him water, she didn't offer him a seat. He took it without asking, and she allowed it, because she needed to hear what he had to say more than she needed to throw him out. "Desmond Ko doesn't just want the recipes," Kenji began, his voice hoarse, as if the words scratched his throat on the way out. "That's what Mr. Tan believes. That's what David thinks. But the truth is worse." Priya didn't move. "Go on. Desmond has debts, many. His company has been losing money for 2 years. The investors who backed him withdrew their support. He's on the verge of losing everything. And a few months ago, a group of foreign investors offered him a lifeline, full financing in exchange for one thing, that he hand over the distribution rights for authentic Singaporean heritage food in North America. But not just any food. Auntie Moy's laksa. Mr. Tan's." Priya frowned. "So, the fake contract wasn't for Desmond to keep the recipes, it was to hand them over to others?" "Exactly. Desmond was going to be the intermediary. He would get a huge commission and save his company. Maybe Lim's recipes were going to end up in the hands of people who would have turned them into industrial products. Factory food with the name Auntie Moy's laksa, everything Mr. Tan swore he would never allow." The silence that followed was heavy. Priya processed every word, and then asked the only remaining question. "And what do you gain by coming here to tell me this?" Kenji looked up for the first time. His eyes were red, sunken, without a trace of that charming smile he had used as a weapon at dinner. "I gain nothing, Priya. I lose everything. Desmond promised me enough money to pay off my debt. My mother is in a private nursing home, the cheapest I could find, and even then, I can't afford it. I've been months behind. When Desmond offered me that amount, I didn't think about Mr. Tan. I didn't think about the recipes. I only thought about my mother sitting in a wheelchair wondering why her son doesn't visit her." His voice broke. He didn't cry, but the break was so profound it was more painful than any tears. "That doesn't justify what I did. I know. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I came because if I don't speak now, Desmond will find another way to get to Mr. Tan. He has the contacts, he has the names of the investors, and he has a second plan that involves filing a false lawsuit against Auntie Moy's laksa for alleged misuse of shared recipes during the partnership. If that goes to court, even if it's a lie, it can paralyze the company for years." Priya looked at him intently and saw something she didn't expect to see. She didn't see the villain of the story. She saw a desperate man who made the worst possible decision for the most human reason in the world. She didn't forgive him, but she understood him. And sometimes, understanding is the first step towards something resembling mercy. "I'm going to call Mr. Tan," Priya said, "and you're going to repeat every word of what you just told me. Understood?" Kenji nodded. Understood. 3 weeks later, Desmond Coe was summoned to testify before the prosecutor specializing in corporate crimes. David Lee presented the complete dossier: the signature at the hotel, Kenji's false references, the telephone records, the altered contract, and now Kenji Tan's direct testimony, who had agreed to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for a fair deal. Desmond arrived at the prosecutor's office with his lawyer in his expensive suit and with the arrogance of someone who believes money can buy any way out. But when the prosecutor showed him the chain of evidence, piece by piece, the arrogance crumbled like a sand wall before a wave. There were no shouts, no dramatic scenes, just the sound of a man swallowing hard while his lawyer whispered in his ear that the best option was to cooperate. Desmond Coe faced charges of fraud, document forgery, and defamation. His company was seized. The foreign investors who had financed the plan disappeared as quickly as they had arrived, like cockroaches fleeing when the light is turned on. The day the news broke, Mr. Tan was in his office. David called him to give him the news. Mr. Tan listened in silence, thanked him, and hung up. He didn't celebrate, didn't toast. He stood up from his chair, walked to MDM, Lim's photograph at the entrance, and simply said, "It's done, mother. It's over." It wasn't easy for Kenji Tan. Justice recognized his cooperation, but that didn't erase what he had done. He lost his reputation, lost contacts, lost the possibility of ever working as a professional translator in any serious company, but something no one predicted happened. Mr. Tan, the man he had tried to destroy, was the one who extended a hand to him, not with a job, not with money, but with something more valuable, an opportunity to start anew. He connected him with an organization that helped people in debt restructure their finances. He paid 3 months of his mother's nursing home fees, while Kenji found stability. And when someone asked him why he helped the man who almost stole everything from him, Mr. Tan replied with the simplicity of someone who had learned life's most important lessons, cooking with his mother on a dirt floor. "Because my mother didn't teach me to hit back. She taught me to lift up those who fall, even if they were the ones who pushed you. That doesn't make me weak. It makes me the son of Lima Moy." Priya started working at Auntie Moy's Laksa on a rainy Monday. She arrived early, as Mr. Tan had unknowingly taught her. She sat in her new office, a small room with a view of the avocado courtyard, and before turning on the computer, she took a photograph of her father from her bag and placed it next to the monitor. In her first month, she translated the documents for the new contract with Global Food Horizons Incorporated, the real one, the fair one, the one Mr. Tan and William Sterling signed together, this time without intermediaries, without lies, and with Priya as the official translator. When Mr. Tan heard his own words translated into English for the first time with the exact sentiment he had put into them, his eyes welled up. And Sterling, who didn't understand Malay but understood the emotion, nodded in silence. Weeks later, Auntie Moy's Laksa launched its first distribution line in the United States. Laksa, char kway teow, Hainanese chicken rice, MDM. Lim's recipes crossed the border inside packaging that bore the same photograph of the woman in the apron next to the clay stove. Below, a phrase Mr. Tan personally chose, "Made with the hands of those who are no longer here, to embrace those who are still here." On opening day, Priya called her father from the event. "Mr. Suresh answered with a weak voice, but full of something that sounded like liquid pride. "How is everything, my daughter?" "Papa MDM. Lim's food is already across the border." "Mr. Suresh was silent for a moment, and then said with that voice Priya would keep forever in the most protected corner of her memory. "So, was it worth it, daughter?" "Everything was worth it. The trays, the tips, the sleepless nights, everything brought you here. And this is exactly where you were meant to be." When December arrived, Mr. Tan traveled to his kampung in Singapore as he did every year, but this time he wasn't alone. Priya accompanied him, and William Sterling, who had flown from New York, also came. In the village square, in front of the school Mr. Tan had helped build, a line of children formed, waiting with bright eyes. Mr. Tan knelt as always and began to hand out new shoes one by one. To each child, he said the same thing: "Feet that walk with dignity travel further than any express train in the world." But this time he added something new: because next to the shoes were boxes of language, books, English, French, Portuguese, donated by Priya, bought with her first full salary at Auntie Moy's Laksa, so that no child in this village ever needs anyone to speak for them, Priya told the gathered parents, so that their own words can reach the world as they are, without anyone changing them. Mr. Tan looked at her, and in the young woman's eyes, he recognized something instantly, the same flame he had seen in his mother's eyes when she cooked. That flame that says, "This that I do matters. This that I give will last longer than I do." Sterling, who didn't understand the words, but felt each one as if they were music, took out his phone and recorded a video of that moment. He posted it that night on his social media with a message in English that translated to, "Today I learned that the most powerful people in the world are not those with the most money, they are those with the most truth. And this truth began with a woman who served tables and dared to speak." The video was shared thousands of times. Priya and Mr. Tan's story reached corners of the world neither of them could imagine. And in the comments, among thousands of messages, there was one Priya read 3 times before tears blurred her screen. It was from a waitress in Buenos Aires who wrote, "Today I dare to speak up at my job. Thank you, Priya. Thank you for teaching me that the apron doesn't take away your voice." That night, when the village was silent and the stars covered the Singaporean sky like a blanket embroidered with light, Mr. Tan walked alone to the columbarium where his mother rested. He knelt in front of the plaque, placed his hand on the stone, and for the first time in many years, he didn't say, "Almost there, mother." He said, "We've arrived, mother. Your food has crossed borders. Your laksa is embracing people who never knew you. And the young woman who saved me is giving books so the children of your village can learn languages, so no one can lie to them with words." The frangipani flowers fell again on the plaque, and Mr. Tan smiled. "You always said that food is the way those who are no longer here continue to embrace those who are still here. You were right, mother, as always." He stood up, dusted his knees, looked at the starry sky, and took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the clean air of the Singaporean countryside, the same air he had breathed as a child when he walked barefoot 3 kilometers to a school without a roof. And he walked back to the kampung with his feet shod, his heart full, and the silent certainty that the most valuable things in life are not signed in a contract. They are inherited with the hands, protected with truth, and shared with the world one plate at a time. Google Search Suggestions. Display of search suggestions is required when using grounding with Google Search. Learn more. Google logo. 92,1